Welcome to the School of Impact, Season 1, Impact Quest with the none other than the tsunami, the tsunami of mobile tech taking over New York by storm. It's a pleasure to have you here, brother. Thank you for joining us.
Wow, thank you for having me, and thank you for that intro. I feel like a superstar already.
There you already are. But first, let's talk about the most important thing happening right now in your life. How's fatherhood?
Fatherhood is a trip, but it's treating me well overall. Yeah, I'm glad to say I'm now a father of two. I just had a baby girl about two and a half, maybe actually 3 weeks, 3 weeks
Yeah,
ago.
yeah, yeah.
So I have a 2 year old son and a 3 week old baby, and not getting very much sleep because of both of them. So that's the main takeaway here. But honestly, feeling blessed.
Yeah.
The baby's doing well. My wife is also doing really well, and we're just getting acclimated to our growing family.
Any stress, any how's it affecting? This is your second now, so I mean I think now you're starting to get used to it. What would you say to just new parents out there in the midst of starting their own venture? What have you noticed going from entrepreneur with, I'm going to say, a little less responsibility and balance to having to maintain that household, two kids, new child? I mean, what does that look like for you?
No, it definitely was a scenario where I had a lot less responsibility, to be frank. But fatherhood and trying to maintain a household while also building a startup ultimately requires that you be ruthless with your time management,
Mm-hmm.
and you have constant reminders that you have very little time to do everything. So if you look at it like an opportunity, you could use this to just be really really efficient with the limited time that you have,
Mm-hmm.
and ideally you might actually be able to get a lot more done than you would have when you were in your single days, and you could
Mm-hmm.
just kind of waste time, or maybe think, oh, I'll just stay up late to get XYZ done. Now I can't really do that, or at least not as often. So I guard my time a lot more, because I'm sharing it with this growing family.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to look at it in the positive, and try to use it as an asset. And hopefully other entrepreneurs can do the same.
There's something called dreaming with constraints or creative constraints, and it's like instead of being able to have unlimited access to unlimited thoughts and dreams, it's like you're focused and you're forcing yourself to design and create within the constraints of a box. Some designers, some creatives say it's the secret and the key actually to getting consistent, high quality, creative work out of you. So
I definitely subscribe to that ideology, and I feel like I'm actually the most creative. There's actually two scenarios,
mm,
like when the pressure is on, and
yeah,
therefore you have a time constraint, there's a deadline or specific deliverables. That's where not only do I kick into high gear, but I do feel energized enough to be creative.
hmm,
And funny enough, like we have this concept of like quote unquote thinking outside the box,
hmm,
but usually it's like when you do have constraints, um, where I don't know how to even explain this, but like the constraints, they force you to um, come up with novel solutions,
hmm,
even though
hmm,
it's still within the constraint.
hmm.
I've had that experience many many times, and I actually have like an approach to getting myself in that mindset where I can be creative, even though there are limitations in what the deliverable, what the outcome should be.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely resonate with that. When did you start Dollar Ride? What year was it?
Um, so we started officially operating as a business in
Hmm.
2018. And in fact, that probably was around the same time you and I were reconnecting, and talking more about Dial Ride,
Hmm.
and I was seeking your help, so often. Um, so that was when Dollar Ride officially started as a business, but I had been working on Dollar Ride and at least doing research,
Yeah.
and kind of gearing up to launching it as a full venture since 2017.
Hmm. What what made you? Yeah, I know you're a New York. You're a New York resident, native. I don't know how you want me to describe that. But kind of, what was your inspiration to start that journey? And this is your second tech like success, right? I mean, not all of us can go two time. While we're here, I want to dust your shoulders off a little bit. This is your second win in the tech industry, correct? In the social sector.
It is. It is. One, I like to call myself a social entrepreneur because I typically gravitate to problems or opportunities that affect people's lives.
Hmm.
And I like building ventures that, deliver some sort of impact to people. Those are the things that really get me out of bed. But yeah, Dollar Ride is my second tech venture, the third business that I've started, or maybe even the fourth now. Um, and the last company I did start was a business that helped nonprofits fundraise online. I ran that company with two other co-founders for 8 years, and we were fortunate enough to get the company acquired in 2019. So, I got that taste of the full life cycle of an entrepreneur, where you build, you hustle, you grind, you hopefully grow the company and the business to the point where it gets attractive enough to be acquired by another entity. So, that's what happened with me in the last business, which was called We Did It.
Hmm. Hmm.
But ultimately, with Dollar Ride, I was inspired by um, basically two concepts or two phenomenons. One, the issues around transit deserts and
Hmm.
how that impacts people's lives. Personally, I grew up in areas of New York City that were severe transit deserts. East New York, Brooklyn, Jamaica, Queens. So I knew intimately what it was like to have a ridiculously long commute every day when you're trying to get to school or to go to
Hmm.
work, and being limited by your access to public transit. So that was one thing that really shaped my mind on Dollar Ride and trying to come up with some solution to this problem. The second phenomenon is something that's local in New York City called dollar vans,
Hmm.
which is a form of informal transit
Hmm.
where local drivers who own their own vehicles operate in the outer boroughs, picking up and dropping off passengers for as little as $2.
Hmm.
This is the same type of service that you'll find in the emerging markets all around the world, where again drivers own their own vehicles, they operate along fixed routes, and they serve the local community, providing them transportation.
Yeah, we have them in Jamaica. Talking about creativity within constraints, it's like people need to get to work. They can't always afford the federal or government run public transportation, and so I mean, you down the road, you have a van and pick up one and two people in the morning, and then what I mean, run his route in the morning, and then you throw him $2 and you get where you need to go. And where are you from
Yep.
originally? Originally, I mean, I imagine this isn't. I know for a fact it's not constrained to just Jamaica. I know this is that type of informal transportation is all over the world. Have you seen it anywhere else?
I have. My family and I are from Nigeria,
Hmm.
and in Lagos, one of the main cities, former capital, we have Danfo buses. So same type of service, same type of system. All of the Danfo buses are yellow, but they operate on fixed routes. They're run by entrepreneurial drivers who are, making a buck, providing transportation to the local community.
Yeah.
But I've seen this style of transit in in the Philippines, where they're called jeepneys, in Mexico, where they're called peseros,
Hmm.
um, in even in Tel Aviv,
Hmm.
where they're referred to as cheroutes.
Hmm.
So this stuff is all around the world. I think there was a study that came out through the World Bank that um, over 100 billion trips are taken every year in informal transit.
Yep.
So it is by far the largest form of mass transit all around the world. but it's definitely super fragmented and run by independent networks. So
Hmm.
it definitely takes a unique solution to making these services more accessible to more people.
And so I think that dovetails properly into the conversation on. So how does Dollar Ride address that issue or serve that market?
Well, what Dollaride does is focus on creating data intelligence fundamentally, because what you find in New York City as well as all around the world where these types of services exist is that they're all driven through word of mouth,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no signage, there are no set schedules, and even the local governments that are aware of these services have very little data on who are the drivers, what vehicles are being used, how often are passengers using them.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big need for transparency, as well as more resources coming into these industries. But you can't do that if you don't know what's really going on. So what Dollaride does is provide data on how these services operate, where they operate, i.e., the routes, and then on top of the data, we provide apps and technologies or products to drivers and riders and now businesses who want to access these services.
Hmm. Can you give us any examples of some of the collaborations you've worked with, especially, across the social sector that people maybe wouldn't think that you can combine your venture with?
Yeah, absolutely. So um, a good example, in New York, we've done projects and now have contracts with CUNY,
Mm-hmm.
the City University of New York. There's a couple of colleges that have reached out to Dollaride to initially just provide them with like a small fleet of drivers and vehicles who can serve the um, the campuses,
Mm-hmm.
where students are throughout the day bouncing, going back and forth between campuses to go to class. But then that led into larger contracts and work with the schools to provide a more consistent service, like shuttle services, from the neighborhoods around New York City to the campuses where the students are going to school.
Right.
So that was something that I didn't predict could happen or would happen when I first started Valoride. But the more and more I got into this field, and the more our work was becoming public, the more other organizations, schools, universities, and businesses, came to us and shared that they had a need for transportation because they too have students or employees or customers
Mm-hmm.
that are dealing with a limited access to transportation.
Yeah, it's a big issue. Transit deserts, and I'll let you break it down because yeah, by this point, you are an expert in that area. Transit deserts, and people don't realize, but also affects aging populations, as well as able-bodied and people who have disabilities. And so, the more informal transportation is sometimes just within the budget range of those who are on fixed incomes. Can you speak a little bit more to how that intersects?
Yeah, absolutely. For one, transit deserts affect all types of people. So it's not only about someone who doesn't have a car,
Mm-hmm.
or access to the local bus, but it could be, like you said, things that are affecting folks, who are dealing with, physical disabilities, or maybe folks who, because of their age, are unable to operate a vehicle by themselves, and therefore they are reliant on some other form of transit, but may not have access to public transit because of where they live.
Yeah.
So, um, you know, this affects a lot of folks. But with that being said, money isn't only like a factor here.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes it's how can I say this? It's like um,
This,
the
yeah.
sorry, what did you say?
No, go ahead. I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah, oftentimes it's not just money that limits people's ability to take these forms of transit.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's how transit interacts with us as consumers, and how available it is to us in terms of meeting us where we are. So,
Mm-hmm.
case in point, in New York City, we have a large and growing population of people who aren't native English speakers. You know, people who come from all around the world, and maybe they speak Mandarin, or
Mm-hmm.
they speak Spanish, right? So if you don't know English very, very well, right, or maybe you're learning English for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
but you need to get to work, or you need to go to school, taking New York City public transit, where everything is written in English, it's also super hectic every single day trying to get on a crowded subway or get on a bus. This is a very intimidating experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we've learned by talking to passengers that the way transportation or public transit communicates to them is sometimes daunting, or intimidating. And that could be a reason why they're more prone to taking another form of transit that meets them where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So, with informal transit or dollar vans, where you oftentimes have a driver who lives in your neighborhood, who comes from the same background that you do, and may be able to speak the language that you're more comfortable communicating in. You
Mm-hmm.
have a service that is more responsive and adaptive to the needs of passengers today, and passengers of all types. So, this is the beauty in these informal forms of transit.
Yeah, no, definitely. So take me back, because no one wakes up and is an expert in their particular area of social venture, right? And so the way we describe social entrepreneurship here at the School of Impact, it's I should say this as it is nonprofit, for profit, agnostic. Your actual structure of your business really doesn't matter. The structure of the business, the legal form of the business only matters depending on how you're going to acquire revenue or how you're going to fund the particular social program that you're doing, right? So there's one part of the venture that is the mechanics of the operation, how you're actually going to operationalize your impact and be able to grasp value from the market, whether that's in donations or whether that is a return for value or for service. But then there's another area where, and I think that was the crux of our work together when we first met. It There's another area of it where you just have to become quote unquote, not fully, but you have to start to dig into the social problem. Can you talk about just your journey on understanding transit deserts and just how that adding that level of sophistication to becoming honestly evidence based and research oriented with this product kind of shaped your journey?
Absolutely. Well, one, I have to give you a shout out because you were one of the first people who opened my eyes to, one, how I should be leveraging the research and expertise at universities,
Mm-hmm.
where they are working on issues like these, and I can tap into the resources that are coming from there.
Mm-hmm.
But then, secondly, you always harped on being able to describe what I do, and and measure what I do in terms of social impact,
Yeah.
because that's where you ultimately can um, like meet this intersection of funders who see value in what you're doing, but also customers who see value in what you're doing, but will pay you for your service.
Yeah.
So, this manifests itself in terms of me developing my knowledge, and my ability to engage with different types of people
Mm-hmm.
to work on this problem. Um, so at one point, when I started, I was really driven by the anecdotes of people, dealing with transportation issues in New York City, and then my own personal experience. That's what got me out of bed.
Yeah.
But what got me running and actually moving toward the solution was engaging with uh, people in academia who were doing research in this field. I connected with a gentleman named Eric Goldwyn,
Yeah.
who's probably one of the leading experts on informal transit. You know, he got his PhD in this in informal transit and how it affects people's lives from Columbia University. And he, you know, for lack of a better term, he schooled me to the game.
Yeah, I read his
But part of
dissertation actually. I won't lie. Like when you, it was available online. I said, "Oh, let's look it up."
yeah, yeah, I encourage everybody to, you know, but like, you know, Eric kind of opened my eyes up to all the other people who were researching this and were actually putting a ton of effort and time into this from an academic perspective. And then that gave me a whole new lens on how to solve this problem, or at least how to talk about it and engage with people who can really make a huge impact on it as I build a business around this.
Yeah.
And
So,
then, you know, and from there, I just you know, progressed to talking to more and more people and building up my knowledge base. That included dealing with regulators in New York City, that's the Taxi Limousine Commission and the Department of Transportation, and then, you know, other business owners, you know, who give me another perspective that, you know, helps me build a product solution that also meets their needs.
and I want to point this out for other entrepreneurs because this is a learning session, right? So I'm going to point out some areas where I think I don't want to gloss over. I want to make sure people understand that early work that you put in to understand what I was talking about a theory of change, how your theory on the outcome of your venture can impact people, and how you get from inputs to outputs into the actual impact, and being able to quantify or qualify those things. um, it led you into some interesting opportunities for, let's call it non-dilutive support, right? I mean, could you talk about some of the early awards or even space that you were given at universities, and kind of how you negotiated that, coming from now having some background and then being able to, do some pitches and, like walk people through that journey?
Absolutely. So for one, Bobby, you were one of the first people who also encouraged me to approach this problem from a systemic change point of view, or have a theory of change. And that led me to talking to multiple types of stakeholders in our
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem to fully understand their perspective, their problem, and how our solution could actually solve these issues for multiple stakeholders. So you're 100% right in bringing up that topic. For the listeners here, super important.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
once I was able to do that, that led to this whole new stream of funding resources that are geared towards social or impact entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
That is non-dilutive, right? These are essentially grants. And just to start out by giving folks an idea, right now, Dalrai has raised $1.5 million in equity funding, right? Thank you, brother. So $1.5 million from investors, right? Traditional investors.
Yeah.
So just think like Shark Tank, right?
Yeah.
I've gone into the Shark Tank dozens of times. I've come out with
I'm
$1.5 million.
sending this to Damon after, so I mean, shout out to Shark Tank. Like,
So that's one source of funding, and that's all in good. But that's a whole different, pathway and approach and experience. On the other side, Dalrai has also raised at this point easily, I mean, I'd say maybe $700,000 of non-dilutive funding, and
mm-hmm.
this all came through applying for grants, going through pitch competitions,
Mm-hmm.
business plan competitions, participating in incubator
I
programs.
mean, you won a few. I mean, drop some names. It's okay. I think you won the clean tech for New York City. You had space at a particular university. What was it, NYU? I don't know the
It was at
exact names.
NYU.
Yeah.
So NYU has a program called the Urban Future Lab,
Mm-hmm.
and you can apply for it. Anyone who has a qualifying business or idea can apply. And I got $50,000 to join this program, and it also came with space at the university in their incubator.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic program, which also led to other opportunities to pitch for more funding from other, foundations and universities and institutions. There's another program at Columbia University called the Tamer Fund for Social Ventures. They provided Colorado with a $25,000 grant, and access to the university's business school where MBA students intern with us, for free to help work on our ventures. So this is like, two of, I don't know, maybe 10 different programs that I've been a part of that ended up with Colorado giving funding, space, or resources to accelerate our business.
It sounds like we have a co-star that wants some airtime in the background there. If you need to handle that, don't worry. We can take a pause.
If you don't mind, give
I
me like 30
I
seconds.
don't at all. I don't at
All
all,
right,
brother.
I'll be right back.
No problem. Fatherhood is a real thing. We gonna show love to that.
Facts. I'll be right back.
Go ahead, man. And so, while we're taking that quick fatherhood break, I think the important thing for people to know while we're having this conversation is as you're building out your venture, Sue started by really just digging into the social issue, right? Really understanding like who he's trying to serve, what social problems he could affect, and then being able to get as deeply evidence based as possible, right? And that led to, as you've heard me talk about with other entrepreneurs, that led to being able to apply for grants, apply for accelerators, have access to free labor at universities, being able to reach out to professors who this is their life's work. This might be a new idea for you, but there's someone out there who has dedicated over 7 or 8 years to understanding the intrinsic problems that are surrounding your particular social venture. And it's often that social entrepreneurs start with a passion and meaning, like Sue did. He's like, man, I grew up in this area. I grew up in Queens, grew up in Jamaica, and I see that people need a better solution to this informal transit system. And with that often starts with the meaning, right? The impact, the meaning, and the purpose is really the trifecta of what makes a great social venture. But when you start to dig into the actual impact, that is where you need to get evidence based, right? That's where you need to reach out to world class experts, and I'm really grateful that he's making the time to hone in on kind of his continued education, and how it led to. I mean, 700,000 is that's no small thing to get started. So, Sue, back with me?
Yeah, I'm back.
All right, no problem, man.
And Little Rio says hi. Hi to you and everyone else who's tuning in.
No worries, no worries. Maybe next time we can have a little real guest star on the show.
Yeah,
I have no doubt
definitely will.
you're raising some entrepreneurs for the future. Do you think about that? Do you think about how you'll encourage, maybe, I mean, if you I don't put words in your mouth, but if how you'll start to introduce entrepreneurship to your own children?
Absolutely. Now, while I don't want to be like prescriptive for their lives or
Of
like their
course.
journey, I entrepreneurship has a special place in my heart and like in my identity. So it'd be hard for them not to be exposed to it.
Yeah.
I just hope that I can show them a side of, how I work so hard that is inspiring to them and not seen as like something that they want to avoid.
Mm.
Because oftentimes when you're building a business, your family, especially your like young kids, they don't fully understand, why you're away from home, or
Hmm.
why you're spending so much time doing X, Y, and Z. And the little that they know, they associate that with the type of work you do.
Hmm.
So, it's not surprising that people
Yeah.
who are small business owners, it's hard for them to pass down that business to their kids because their kids don't want to have the same life that they see their parents having,
Yeah.
especially if it includes a lot of struggle and heartache, which is what business is, about.
Yeah.
you know, it has those ups and downs,
Yeah.
right? So I just hope that my kids will somehow be able to take the good from it and be inspired to start something on their own.
No,
They
that's
certainly will
powerful.
have my support.
That's powerful. That's powerful. You know, I think a lot about how we start to introduce the next generation, not only to uh, social entrepreneurship as we talk about it, and you know, we glorify it in Forbes 30/30 and such, but also entrepreneurship, right? Like, I'm really passionate about the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. We won't reach them. It's not a possibility. The research is out there, and in my opinion, the reason we more than likely won't reach the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals set by the UN is because there just aren't enough people who are engaged in the sector and who understand it. And the formalized education around social entrepreneurship, social impact, it really isn't there, right? And I truly believe we need people on both ends of the spectrum. We need people who are working in foundations. We need people who are taking impact and community development roles within large corporate, you know, Fortune 100 corporations. Amazon has a small business incubator now. They have a someone in charge of social entrepreneurship. Nike, all of these top firms have people in an entire teams dedicated to understanding how their company intersects with social entrepreneurship, social impact, social innovation. It is the future. It's here. And so I think we need to start to talk about how we formalize education to get more people into this field across the board, right? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I totally agree. I'll be quick with this too. One side of this coin that kind of reflects what we're going up against, but why we need more education around social entrepreneurship and encouraging, entrepreneurs and these essentially pipelines of people who can create the future that we want, is, you know, startups and entrepreneurship is glorified today, but it's done in a way where it's sort of like junk food, right? Like if you don't know much about business,
Yeah.
you could very easily be exposed to just like the headlines of, Elon Musk does this, or TechCrunch. This company raised $40 million to do Y, but you don't know really the nuts and bolts of what is it like to build a business, and how do you actually create impact that's long standing and that affects the people in your lives. So that's something that we're gonna have to like combat with real education.
Mm-hmm.
And this also gets a bit worse in terms of that fight because there are entrepreneurs on TikTok, so to speak, right,
It's true.
or on Instagram, right. There's another world of making money through
NFTs.
right, through social media and through through crypto, right, and Web3 now. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of ways where people can make a buck. Um, but social entrepreneurship and impact is different. And while those other things, I would call it more like junk food.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff that I think we're doing, and what you're talking about today, and what you're trying to teach people, um, is much more. It has much more longevity.
Yeah.
So it deserves a different space.
Yeah. And honestly, for me personally, I see it in the long view. I'm scared about what might happen if we don't start to rein in our Milton Friedman sort of thinking around business and entrepreneurship. Just maximize, make as much money as possible. If it hurts the environment, we'll pay the EPA. If we have to fire 300, 700 people, I think we've gone as far as we can go with that type of capitalism. And I think people like you, are redefining capitalism, redefining how we start to help our communities. It's Black Excellence Month, so I'd be remiss not to talk about the people that came before us, right? Like, let's not forget Martin Luther King Jr. At the end of his journey, unfortunately taken from us early, he started to focus on economic parity, started to focus on the Poor People's March, right? Which was, a multiracial march for people of color, and honestly, it represented other people who were just poor because he realized that above everything, if we can't provide a quality of just living, a quality of existing at a base level, at the end of the day, what does it mean to be free, right?
Absolutely, especially in the capitalistic world, right? Yeah, I think you said that, eloquently. I can't top that.
Well, we're not here to top each other, man. We're just here to inspire and show love and let God speak through us. So, so let's focus more on you, man. I want to get the value of your time because I do greatly appreciate you making time. I know you have infinite pulls on your time, so I want to get the most value for people watching this as possible. Let's talk about and you brought this up, right? People who are watching more of the headlines, more of the pitch book, tech crunch, entrepreneurship. It's like everyone thinks like, oh, I have to go venture backed. Oh, I have to get VC cap, and when in reality, one, most of the investments made in the United States are made through what are called private placement. And they're not VC backed. They're just made by individuals, either in state or national. That's how the majority of sophisticated entrepreneurs raise capital, right? For the small percentage of cap that is raised using traditional venture cap or impact investors, what type of venture do you need to build to be attractive to someone who wants to invest in your venture and is seeking either a market rate return, or as typical impact investors will, below market rate return?
So the rule of thumb here is you got to be building $1 billion company, point blank period, right? And the reason why is because most funds, the pools of money where the investor is going to write you the check, right? Especially particularly in the VC space, and that includes for impact funds too. Most of the time, the funds are structured in a way where, considering the amount of money that they've raised
Mm-hmm.
and the terms that they are under, where they have to
Mm-hmm.
return, or they have an expectation of returning around 3x the fund,
Mm-hmm.
that requires that any one of the companies that they invest in at least has the potential to become $1 billion outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So, what this means to us as founders and entrepreneurs is that if you're working on the type of business that doesn't have what they call venture scale,
Mm-hmm.
where it could become $1 billion business at some point in the relatively near future, then you're going to have a really hard time raising venture capital, and you
Mm-hmm.
probably need a different source of capital to build your business. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nope.
That's in fact that's part of the reason why the first money in to Dollarine was non-dilutive grant funding, and things that I obtained through like pitch competitions. Because at the time, I didn't know or necessarily think that I was building some $1 billion type business. I was just trying to solve a problem that I knew very intimately because I've experienced that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's always a good place to start. But until it's crystal clear to you that you're building something that can have impact on millions or billions of people, or can generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue within 5 years, you probably don't need to go the route of venture capital, and you can find just as much capital as you do need elsewhere. I'm gonna really quickly state too that one of the biggest investors in private companies is the federal government. The federal government has this program called from the National Science Foundation, one of the government agencies, called the Seed Grant.
Yeah.
And as long as you're proposing an idea that is innovative and has some technical risk, you can obtain up to $2 million in grant funding
Mm-hmm.
from the federal government, on your idea. Like, you don't actually have to have had a business already. Like, you can be in the very early stages of developing a solution, but you can be on this pathway of getting nearly $2 million in grant funding from the government. The government gives out grants like these every year to the tune of like hundreds of billions of dollars, I believe,
Mm.
every year. So the funding is out there, and it doesn't always have to come from venture capital.
I think that's great advice, and I only smile because I remember that we worked on the seed fund grant together. That was it was
Yep.
it's intense. It's not for the faint.
I didn't say it was easy.
They're not giving money away now. Now you need to sit down and really dig in. But if you're
Right.
about that life, you're about that life, right? And
True.
but
True.
I'll only add this. Even outside of the Fed, well, some of this funding may even start at the federal level and trickle down, even within your state. Check out who your they're called different things in different states. The Economic Development Corporation is for your
Right.
particular state. Check out who's running within the vein of your particular impact, right? So let's say Dollar Ride. There's someone in the state of New York who is in charge of investing in clean tech, clean energy
Mhm.
solutions. Am I like? I'll let you take it over from there.
You hit the nail on the head. In fact, let me see if I can show you guys this. Do you mind if I show
Yep, no
the
problem at all.
I'll bring something? So here's a perfect example of what Bobby's talking about. Um, so Bobby, let me know when I have the presentation
Co-hosts,
ready to share.
you've got it.
So years ago, Bobby told me, Sue, because of what you're doing, and its ability to deliver impact, you need to be aware of all these other different funding sources. And as he just said, when it comes to like state level funding, you'd be surprised how much money is out there and how available it is to folks with even just an early idea. Case in point, in New York State, um, recently they launched a program called the New York Clean Transportation Prize, and this was in total an $85 million program where they have three categories, all focused on providing clean transportation in some way or another. This category is called Clean Neighborhoods, where they're giving away $30 million to three projects. So each will get $10 million each, but the projects have to deliver a clean transportation solution to disadvantaged communities.
Mm-hmm.
Here's something similar. It's 24 million going to three recipients that are doing something that will accelerate the electrification of buses and trucks.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's a similar program, $7 million each to three different projects that have to do something with electric mobility, like scooters and bike share or other electric modes. These are grants, right? And it's an application process. It's open to anyone who can produce and deliver a solution in New York State,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's completely run by the state.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate and very, very happy and proud to share that Dollar Ride applied to this. It took a ton of work to actually, to deliver the proposal.
Mm-hmm.
But we were recently announced as a finalist for one of these awards. All right, so right now we're one of 5 or 6 companies that can receive the three $10 million awards, right? But if I didn't know about this and didn't take the many months to develop the concepts, the solution, and to apply, I would have missed out on this opportunity that was right in my backyard.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. Thank you for sharing that. Really, and I'm just gonna put it into the ether. When you win, you know, hope to have you back so you can talk about what it's like to receive that type of federal grant actually, and what it looks like to work through that process. That's a whole lesson in itself, like managing the funds once you get it in the door, especially from an investor of that caliber.
Very true. Well, I would love to be back, but I would love to come back for that reason. We talk about
Yeah,
what is it like to get this $10 million.
$10 million. Like, let's just talk about. Man, I believe in it, and I believe in you, and that's why I continue to support you, man. You've had not only just a sharp brother, but yeah, but you're about your business. You're about learning anything. I'll just speak on you. Anything I send you, and I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, right? A lot of people make excuses, and they have valid. Some people have valid excuses. They have valid reasons for why they can't do what they do. But it's the work ethic. It's the I want to learn any little piece that I can. I don't care if it's one article. I don't care if I have to read. Like you'll put that work in. And what I see consistently with entrepreneurs who are, I'm gonna say you're at the early stages. Some people might say you're maybe mezzanine level because you're a million plus in revenue now and investment. But I think you maybe I'd consider you probably still early stage for most sophisticated investors. When you're at the early stages, that hunger for knowledge, that hunger for advisors who are best in class within your area, you need to have define that area prior. You need to really have it clear, like what problem are you solving? What area of social impact do you have to have the best minds around you? And when you develop that type of hunger and that execution, that's when you're ready to really go after these $10 million opportunities consistently because people start to know your name as well. People start to know that you're serious.
100%. 100%. There's this adage that you're the average of the five people you hang around with, right? And the same thing applies in business and when you're starting your company. You know, like Bobby said, you want to surround yourself with experts, with people who know more than you,
Mm-hmm.
but more importantly, you want to be coachable
Yep.
because if they are truly good at what they do, you're going to absorb that knowledge and it's going to become a part of how you think about solving these problems, delivering solutions, building your team, and executing. And the world will notice. People reach out to Dollar Ride and reach out to me now because they see what we've done and they see that there's a track record of continuing to pound the pavement and make progress.
Of
Um,
excellence. Just call it what it
yeah.
is. A track record of excellence. I'll hype you. You can stay humble. A track record of excellence. That's
Thank
just
you.
what it takes. Let's put it out there. All right. I want to transition, man. Let's get a little spiritual, if you don't mind. What as we think of impact, and I know for me, the reason that I continuously focus on this space, the reason that I continuously push for impact and push people to just think about their impact, because I believe money will come. I believe money will come with excellence. Money will come with rigor. But if you're not focused on what drives you and how what you're doing every day connects to something greater than you, I think it dries you up inside unless you're Elon Musk and you're just really excited about solar panel roofing. Like I just believe like or going to space. I just believe that for the few of us that aren't Elon, I think we need to connect to something deeper for the rough times, for the times when you don't get the grant of the 200 you and I've seen your Excel list, so I know the the two the 200 plus grants and opportunities that you apply for each month. When you don't get those, like, talk to me about what impact really means to you, not just with Dollar Ride, but like what impact do you want when you one day leave this world, hopefully long time from now? Like how does your work right now sort of help you define the footprint you're leaving on earth?
I don't want to be cliche, but I'm going to be a little cliche. Um, we talk a lot these days about leaving a legacy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And, you know, I don't think about that every day, but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, what gets me out of bed and what gets me going, even though I might have just gotten knocked down or I've received some bad news or something isn't working in the product or we just heard another no from an investor or from a customer, all of which are things that happen every single day,
Yeah.
amongst all the good things that happen too,
Yeah.
right? But through these constant ups and downs, the thing that keeps me grounded is the fact that um, I know the people that I'm serving. I personally know them. I have a connection to the marketplace that gives me like this visceral reaction
Mm.
and and connection to
mm, mm.
what they need and whether or not I'm successful or not at delivering it, right? So it's like I don't want to let people down because I see them every day. It's as visceral as that. Like
Yeah,
I don't want to have to explain to a dollar van driver who I've been talking to for years, and I've
yeah,
gone to events and met his family, right? I don't want to have to explain to them that, oh, stuff is not working out. I'm just gonna quit, or
yeah,
oh, this thing happened with this investor, and it doesn't look like we're gonna be able to do this anymore. Like stopping and quitting isn't even an option because my reputation is on the line, but
mm-hmm.
this is also like part of my identity, my connection to the communities and the problem that we're trying to solve. It's really ingrained, and while that can make you maybe more emotional about the aspects of building a business, that can
Yeah,
be for better or for worse, it definitely is a huge motivator,
yeah,
right? So I think you can use this as fuel, as an advantage, if to your core what you're doing is like a part of your identity.
yeah,
And Bobby, I know this resonates with you because your first business and foray into entrepreneurship with your fencing program
yeah, yeah,
very much came from your experience learning fencing
yeah.
and how that changed your life
In New York,
in New York at that.
a
Tell me
new
about that part.
Peter Westbrook Foundation, gave me an opportunity when I was just a young teenager, and out of hundreds of other, middle school teens applying for 8 seats. And I had the opportunity to train with the U.S. Olympic team and receive U.S. Olympic level coaching, which I definitely couldn't afford, after school tutoring. And so, if it weren't for, another brother taking the time, who absolutely didn't need to take the time to start a nonprofit to help me, I wouldn't have got a scholarship to college. I, wouldn't have made it out to Detroit. So, yeah, being in Detroit, I saw other just young black people who needed an opportunity and a way to get to college, and yeah, I was like, I can do something. Like, I might not know how to do this, but I'm gonna figure it out because, somebody did it for me. So yeah.
Right, right. That burning feeling that like you have to do it or that you can figure it out, that's the gold. That right there can get you through all the ups and downs and make you run through walls, which is probably necessary if you're going to be successful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had 30 no's in my first year saying I was going to start on guard Detroit. I had 30 schools tell me no. I just straight up, just back to back to back to back to back. And honestly, it's just I was just like, well, what am I gonna do? And what it made me do is sit down and understand why they were telling me no. Understand how to learn about school systems. I had to become an education expert. I had to understand, No Child Left Behind funding. I had to understand SIG grants. I had to understand what motivated principals to say yes, right? And
Right.
I had to get deeper on my customer. I had to understand my customer. But look, Sue, this has been great. I want to leave on this spiritual note. I want to leave on what drives us and what connects us. Anything coming up for you in the recent months? Anything we can subscribe to? I mean, throw your channels out there. Any books coming out we can catch some of this tsunami magic.
Nah, no books for me, not yet at least.
That's right.
But I do got this NFT dropping.
Look, if you get the NFT, Dollar Ride service is just built in. It's free. We I see.
All right, all right.
I'm just I'm just saying that. I'm just saying. I'm saying.
uh,
Um,
for anyone who wants to follow along, you can find Dollar Ride on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're just at Dollar Ride on all those platforms. So we're pretty easy to find. And Dollar Ride is DOLLARIDE. And yeah, over the next few months, you'll just see news from us about new routes that we launch, uh, events and things that are related to transportation, especially the plight of folks who live in transit deserts. So if any of this stuff resonates with you, reach out, follow us and engage with us. We'd be happy to chat.
Well, thank you for your time, brother. Thank you for your energy. Congratulations to you and your queen on birthing a new ruler. And yeah, man, just keep doing what you're doing, and I expect great things out of you in the future.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me on the show. I look forward to coming back.
All right, hold you to that. Have a good one.
You too, buddy.
Peace.